invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the fifth chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the fifth chapter.
That's right. Welcome to the fifth chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian, and we are rocking and ready to go for episode 32, where we know the entirety of the sports world is focusing on this show, Dennis.
Well, they don't have anything else to focus on, so they kind of lucked out tonight. Like the NHL and NBA playoffs, which we're going to be talking about. We know what's going on there, right?
Yeah, that's right. And everybody is on board doing the same thing. Definitely want to thank everybody out there for tuning in to episode 32. We've got 5 fantastic chapters for you. Before we get to today's book, want to thank everyone who's watching on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch, and also those listening to the podcast via Apple, Google, and Spotify. For those of you interested in listening to the podcast, that is available just before midnight on the day of each show. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending in your comments via Twitch, via Facebook Live, and via YouTube. Let's take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, Nebraska's players are suing the Big Ten. They're not done fighting for this fall season just yet. We'll tell you what their lawsuit entails and what the parents are saying about it. In the third chapter, Avila spoke today about the plan for Matt Manning for the rest of the year, one of the Tigers' top prospects, as well as next Monday's trade deadline. In the fourth chapter, exciting new news about a coronavirus rapid test that the White House is fully behind. We'll give you the details on that and whether or not it's a game changer or it's a fake news hoax. And then in the fifth chapter, it is story time. I, of course, have another ride-sharing story to share with you guys. But we start off with the first chapter, and that takes us to, well, no sports. You guys might remember on Tuesday's show, we played video of Raptors guard Fred VanVleet speaking to fake news reporters about the possibility of boycotting their Game 1 matchup against the Celtics on Thursday, meaning today, to protest the shooting of Jacob Blake. And if you remember in that video, he said that in a perfect world, the Bucks, who are obviously based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, would boycott their next game because it happened in their home state, and then they could all take a stand. Yesterday, before Game 5 of the Magic versus Bucks series, well, the Bucks did exactly what Fred VanVleet wanted them to do. Because while the Magic came out for their pregame warm-ups, the Milwaukee Bucks never did come out, and then they announced that they were not going to be playing, and they informed reporters that it was to protest the shooting of Jacob Blake, and then the players prepared a statement and read it to members of the media, and here is what they said.
Our team statement, the past 4 months have shed a light on the ongoing racial injustices facing our African-American community. Citizens around the country have used their voices and platforms to speak out against these wrongdoings. Over the last few days in our home state of Wisconsin, we've seen the horrendous video of Jacob Blake being shot in the back 7 times by a police officer in Kenosha, and the additional shooting of protesters. Despite the overwhelming plea for change, there has been no action. So our focus today cannot be on basketball.
When we take the court and represent Milwaukee and Wisconsin, we are expected to play at a high level, give maximum effort, and hold each other accountable. We hold ourselves to that standard, and in this moment, we are demanding the same from lawmakers and law enforcement. We are calling for justice for Jacob Blake and demand the officers be held accountable. For this to occur, it is imperative for the Wisconsin State Legislature to reconvene after months of inaction and take up meaningful measures to address issues of police accountability, brutality, and criminal justice reform. We encourage all citizens to educate themselves, Take peaceful and responsible action, and remember to vote on November 3rd on behalf of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's what they did before yesterday's game. And they also, instead of playing in yesterday's game, they also, according to reports, spent a few hours talking to politicians and trying to figure out what else they could do. The NBA responded by postponing the other two playoff games on yesterday's schedule as well. Last night, there was actually a lot of concern that the rest of the season could be canceled over this. And they actually took a vote inside the bubble, all the bubble teams that have not been eliminated from the playoffs. And according to reports, the Clippers and Lakers voted to discontinue the season while the other teams voted to continue playing. Earlier today, they announced that they would continue playing. But this is getting very serious because it's not just the NBA. Multiple baseball games were postponed today due to the shooting of Jacob Blake, and there are also 3 games yesterday. Games in the WNBA and MLS were postponed yesterday, so there are 14 total postponements yesterday. And then one of the players of the New York Mets spoke to reporters about what he's been going through and about how his mind was not completely into yesterday's game. And here is what he said after yesterday's game.
Yeah, it was a long day for me, so I kind of wasn't there mentally, but we'll be all right. I think the most difficult part is to see, like, people still don't care. And for this to just continuously happen, I mean, it just shows just the hate in people's heart. And I mean, that just sucks, you know? And being a black man in America is not easy, so.
So very tough to see a grown man in Dominic Smith crying while talking about this situation. And as we all know, this all started with the Detroit Lions because they canceled their practice on Tuesday to protest the shooting of Jacob Blake. It continued with NBA games and several other games yesterday, and now there's hardly anything going on, including no Tigers-Twins right now. Dennis, what do you make of all these athletes taking another step forward to fight racial injustice? And do you think that perhaps it was a drastic step that went too far?
Well, I don't think it went too far, and I think they're going to continue doing things like this. And it was organic. It happened where they weren't planning on doing it earlier in the day, but when they got together, they did do that. Then the other teams followed. That was good. What the Lions did the day before, it was a little clunky today with then another like half dozen baseball teams and then another, 8 football teams saying that, that they weren't going to practice today. But, I think that's all coming from a good place. It just the way the schedule was, this team's going. The Twins say they're not going to. It was a little bit strange in watching it unfold. But, man, I think what happens is like can you have empathy for not just basketball players, but for Black America? And I think that going back to late May, I thought there were a lot of people that did have empathy for this movement and were trying to put themselves in other people's shoes and think about, wow, man, this is really painful for my neighbor and for my fellow Americans. But, man, if you go online, it's immediate after this, like, no, man, these NBA players are selfish. These guys probably just want to get out of the bubble so they can go back to their mansions. Nobody's watching these games anyways. That guy should have complied. I mean, all the things that you hear. And there could be some arguments for that, but not even like a second online of people showing like a little bit of empathy or saying, hey, man, I got your back. I feel your pain. Exactly the opposite, man. It's been like, you know what, Rudy Giuliani is like, you know what, Doc Rivers, man, this is a Democratic ploy and everything. And it's just like, wow, man, if you hang out online and you engage with people and instead of like, talking to people that show some respect. Nobody, and it goes both ways. You don't see a lot. There's not a lot of respect on either side. But man, I'm not telling anybody anything new. But it just that part of it is sad. You can't even get a second of somebody, like, even if you don't like the NBA, even if you really think like the guy Jacob Blake was in the wrong and should have complied. You're not even like, hey, you know what? Yeah, you don't comply, you're gonna get blown. You're gonna get blown away with 7 bullets in the back. I mean, that seems pretty drastic, but people are pretty cut and dry. Like, yeah, you know what? He was a criminal. He should have listened. You don't do that, you're gonna get 7 in the back. It's like just cold and dry, just like no empathy. And for that part. I'm sad, but the vast majority of people that I deal with, they are looking and you see the pain on these NBA players. You see sports having some empathy, and you know what? Sports, by and large, when you look, not hockey, but most of the other sports, when you look in those locker rooms, you have people from all walks of life and all races, and they're teammates and they deal with each other. If you never deal with any black people, and maybe you just tuning into the things that you like, maybe that's what you do when you see one of these. Like, yeah, let's just go online and and just start rolling out with some talking points to the other side. But yeah, I think we're going to see more of this. Hopefully we don't have tragic deaths and police bad cops, but we know that that's going to happen. But we're going to have more of these things and more of protests like this. And athletes, they've got a lot of money, they've got a lot of power, and they've got big-time platforms. So we saw that yesterday, and we're seeing it today.
Yeah, and I understand that when you go online, you're oftentimes going to be shocked by some of the things you see that perhaps are contrary to your views. But I don't think that it's everybody or even half of America is outraged. And I put up a hashtag BChap Sports poll on Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitter. You can see right there at BChap Sports. This is obviously an unscientific poll, but I put up this poll yesterday. I want to show you the results of it, and it was about the NBA postponing the 3 games based on the Jacob Blake shooting, and how do you feel about it? 60.2% said that it was a good use of the platform. 27.2% said that they were okay with it, but they went a little bit overboard. And then 12.6% said they're sick of whiny blacks. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's going to be that element. There's going to be people out there that are just, sick of whiny blacks or whatever they want to call it. But I was certainly in that 60% that thought that it was a good use of their platform. People always talk about, well, what are you going to do about it? And they put Black Lives Matter on the court, and they put equality on the back of their jerseys. That's not going to do anything. And people are going to say, hey, not playing a basketball game or not playing a baseball game isn't going to do anything. But if they're trying to draw attention to their messages, then I think that this is going to do it. Because one of the things that Fred Van Vliet said on Tuesday, either Monday or Tuesday, was that they tried just putting the messages out there and nothing has changed. When the Bucks gave their statement yesterday, they said, we tried doing these things, but nothing has changed. And so they demanded the Wisconsin legislature get back together, reconvene, and pass some laws, do some real work. They spoke to politicians reportedly during that time. On top of that, when it comes to sports as a distraction, that's what people use it as. Oh, you know what? Look at all the things going on in this world right now. The two parties are fighting. We got this monster hurricane that's killing people. We got coronavirus that's killing people. We got a high unemployment rate. We got racial unrest. I don't want to deal with that. I want to not think about that at all. Where's the distraction? Oh, I know. Sports. They're back. I've got basketball, I got baseball, I got hockey. I can just sit back with my beer and flip channels all night long and not think about what's going on. Who's playing in the NHL? What? They're boycotting because of these blacks? Well, what about basketball? They're boycotting because of blacks? Well, what about the Tigers? They've won 4 out of 6. Come on, Tigers, you don't want to ruin your own momentum. They don't want to play the Twins tonight? And when you don't have those distractions, you're forced to, well, maybe you're not forced to think about it, but there's less of a reason to not think about what's going on. And I think what these athletes are saying is, we're tired of you guys just using us as solely for entertainment and not listening to our messages. Now we're not going to give you the entertainment that you seek, and see if now you'll wake up and start listening to us when we say that there's an issue in our communities with police brutality.
Yeah, there's been protests long before you and I were born. You think back of the '68 Olympics, the guys up on the podium putting their arms up in the air here. And, for people like, you go back to 4 years yesterday, that's when Colin Kaepernick took a knee. And a lot of people did not like that. And then in the ensuing days were like, just get this off my TV. I don't want to see this. And that was kind of the same thing with George Floyd. It's like, I don't want to see this. Protest on your own time. And that's what they're saying now. It's like, hey, why do you got to do this?
Well, guess what? Earlier this week, Roger Goodell apologized for not listening to Colin Kaepernick earlier.
Well, if you're going to say, just get it off my TV, go ahead and protest on your own. It's like, that's the point. Like, nobody's paying any attention to the protests. The thing about Kaepernick, and I didn't like it for the first day, I had to really think about it and examine it. And it was a peaceful protest. And I had to think like, what he was saying here's like, why can't you go just protest, on your own where I don't have to see it? Well, that doesn't work. It's the same thing with the NBA players last night. It's like, what good is that going to do? Well, it's got a lot of people talking. And I was encouraged a little bit in the weeks after George Floyd. I mean, there was a lot of marches, there was a lot of movement, there was a lot of talk. There really was. And then you're not going to keep it going for the whole summer. And then what the NBA did, instead of having some positive conversations, they had Black Lives Matter on the court, and people were like, "That's a stupid thing to put in." Like, stupid thing to put on. I didn't get the backlash. I mean, the sayings on the back, some of them in a foreign language, and then you couldn't see the players. I mean, I could understand. I had that criticism myself, but the backlash, like, what are they? I'm tired of these political statements and everything else, but. It's going to continue on. Like, I saw the Ravens just before we came on here. They didn't practice today, and they want charges in the Breonna Taylor murder. That was the lady in Louisville. They want arrests in Wisconsin. Like, I don't know if they're saying they're not going back to practice until then, but they put demands out. And they said, what's going to happen? I thought the one thing, you were tweeting me late last night when it was there was a real chance that the NBA was just going to hang it up and just fold it up for the playoffs. And I thought, wow, man, that doesn't seem like a good idea. You have a chance after all of these games. You have a chance before the games. You have a chance during the games, that people are going to be interested and, they're going to hear what you have to say. If you fold it up and just say, we're just not going to play in the NBA, nobody's going to be, maybe LeBron James or maybe a couple other players, but I think what is best for them, not for the entertainment side, just talking about getting more of the message and continuing the conversation, would be for the NBA to continue to play.
Yeah, I think it would, and I think it would also perhaps make the story even bigger if they continue to play while a couple of big name players weren't playing. For instance, if the Houston Rockets were able to beat the Thunder and move on to the second round, but James Harden decided that he was going to opt out, then for all 4, 5, 6, or 7 games of that next round, whenever you're watching the Rockets play, you'd be watching them play without their best player, and you'd have to think about the reason why. Now, you might not agree, but you'd have to think about that. The other thing I think is important is when you think about people that are dismissing what's going on, and I say, oh, nobody cares about the NBA. Nobody cares about the NHL. That's the Canada sport. Nobody cares about baseball in this bastardized season. Who cares about what soccer and the WNBA are going? Nobody says that about the NFL. And everybody assumes that the NFL is going to play no matter what, whether it's because of coronavirus, whether it's because of these protests, that the NFL is just going to trudge along no matter what. But perhaps there's a chink in that armor, because I'm going to put up something from ESPN.com that I found earlier today, and it's about the New York Giants. A couple of Giants players were asked about it. One of them, Saquon Barkley, was asked about whether or not they would consider boycotting regular season NFL games, and he said, I can't really just go and speak on behalf of the whole league, but for us, that is something that we're going to talk about within our social justice groups, within our team. What's talked about in players' meetings stays in players' meetings. His teammate Sterling Shepard was asked a similar question and said, that's something that we're going to talk about as a team. I'm not going to comment on that until we do so. Now, perhaps this is just a big bluff, but considering football is the favorite sport of America right now, and the NFL is the favorite league of America right now, how crazy would it be if the NFL players either in unison decided to boycott an entire week of regular season football, or instead of in unison, a few teams decided that they were just not going to show up and not going to play in a particular game, so that at the end of the year, most teams had played 16 games, but maybe 4 or 8 or 12 teams had only played 15 games. How could you not notice that if you're ready to sit back at 1 p.m. or 4 p.m. on an NFL Sunday, you filled out your fantasy football league roster, and all of a sudden your team and your players aren't playing? You can't ignore that.
No, you couldn't. I had never really thought about that. This would be the year. Like, could you imagine doing it if you had packed stadiums and then the team was just like, no, we're going to boycott? Can you imagine, the people at the game, how they would feel? I can imagine myself being at a game like, wait a second, they're not going to play. They're making a statement. But without fans, it becomes much easier to say, you know what? No, we're just not going to go out there. We're just going to boycott it. We got a lot of feedback coming in from both YouTube and Facebook Live. Here's Ryan B on Facebook. It says Sky Sports is becoming a huge part of how we frame this unbelievably tough conversation. Oh yeah, sports is smack dab here in the middle, making not just suggestions, making demands, keeping the conversation going. There's no doubt that sports is in all the leagues. You saw the Bucks, you saw the teams that followed them last night, you saw the NHL, you're seeing baseball, you saw the Lions the day before, like all of them. And in some ways it's surprising that we've never seen anything like this from players or teams before. And yeah, like anything is possible right now. You talking about the NFL in the regular season, that's not fun to think about, but is there a chance that you could see something like that after we saw what we saw last night? I think so. Keith is saying a lot of things about politics, saying you guys never want to talk politics, but this is one of those things. Like with college football, we know that politics is when you look at the blue versus the red states and what conferences are playing football and what conferences aren't. And we know that Donald Trump, when it comes to the NBA and the NFL, he says a lot of different things, to rally, Republicans, and the Democrats are coming back. So this is something that, sports and politics are one and the same here when it comes to college football, when it comes to the NBA, when it comes to the shooting in Wisconsin.
And speaking of which, earlier today, Mark Short, who is the Chief of Staff of Vice President Mike Pence, was interviewed about the protesting basketball players, and here is what he had to say on CNN's New Day.
Does Vice President Pence support the NBA players' boycott of their season?
Look, I don't know that you're going to see the administration weigh in that one way or the other. In my mind, it's absurd and silly. What you saw from the Professional Basketball Association was a continued acceptance and non-denial or non-speaking out against China's continued abuse. Instead, wrap their arms around their
but I'm talking about
with China.
this. I mean, I'm talking about the protests.
I am. Yeah, I know you are. You're talking about NBA, and I'm saying they're continuing to allow NBA players to continue to support China when they continue to repress people, continue to persecute people for speaking out their minds.
Okay, I understand you're upset about that,
now.
but they're upset about Jacob Blake. What happened to Jacob Blake? And so why is that absurd?
If they want to protest, I don't think we care. I think at this point...
Just think about those comments right there. I mean, first of all, saying that the protests are absurd and silly, and then saying if they want to protest, I don't think we care. Things like that is what's going to get more protests to happen. If they want the government to take action and a leading government official says, oh, what you guys are doing is absurd, it's silly, and if you want to do that, I don't think we're going to care, or I don't think we care, I don't know how that's going to be beneficial in this whole argument. I don't know how that's going to be beneficial for the country as a whole. Government officials saying we don't care about your peaceful protests.
Yeah, well, being a jerk's not a way to start anything like that. Like, if he's against him, is there ways more tactful than, talking about, like, again, it comes back to, let's have some respect, let's show some empathy, and not like, yeah, but how come you're not showing me any? Like, you know what? You're in the position there. Show some respect for what's going on here for your fellow Americans, and stop acting like a prick. I mean, that's kind of an absurd, silly. The video that I just watched there, Chapman.
It actually happened. This is it. I mean,
know.
he's a legitimate White House official saying what these guys are doing is silly, it's absurd, and if they want to do it, we don't really care.
Yeah, look, when I watch, I don't watch as much cable news as most people. Like, probably 10%. But I do watch sometimes Fox, and I'm trying to listen to what they have to say, and see if I can understand their points. I do the same thing with CNN. Most of the time when I'm watching, it's like I'm in two different countries or on two different planets, and then I just turn it off and just move on. But yeah, I mean, I could see what we were just watching there. It's like where's the tact? I mean, where's the nuance when it comes down to it? It's like what about even if you are completely, in your own mind thinking, you know what, those officers were justified. I'm not saying that they were. That shooting guys 7 times in the back, I don't think so. But if you really thought, hey, you know what, you have to comply. We really don't know, what that guy was capable of going into his car. Can you still, this is something that has hurt Americans. So how about recognizing that instead of just trying to, stir up a hornet's nest? I mean, that seems silly to me.
Yeah. All right, we'll definitely keep the feedback coming in on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. Let's now turn the page to the second chapter.
The second chapter gets us to the Big Ten, and even though they're not playing football, they're making headlines left and right. They're going to play in the winter. We've got possibly new testing. We're going to get into that. One of the other chapters, as you saw. But today, the big news is we had 8 players from Nebraska suing the Big Ten. They want documents. Remember, we go back to the 11th, just over 2 weeks ago, when the Big Ten canceled, and the Commissioner Kevin Warren came out and said, we're canceling. It's the virus. See you later. And then everybody's like, well, we'd like to have a little bit more explanation. And then 8 or 9 days later, he decided, I'm going to put out a canned response. Hey, it's COVID. Thank you. There's not going to be any more discussions. Good night. And the parents of the Big Ten, it might make your head explode, and you might be tired of wanting the answers. But you know what? When you see the other conferences playing and you're not getting the answers, as a college football fan, you're like, well, what's the Big Ten have to hide here? Did your lawyers really have to tell you to be that vague with everything because you're so worried about getting sued and misstepping here that you can't tell everybody? It's just like, duh, it's the virus, or is it a little bit more, or what's going on? And there's a lot of people that don't think the Big Ten need to explain anything else, Chapman. But what do you think about these Nebraska players and coming up with the lawsuit against the Big Ten? They want some answers.
Yeah, I've seen some experts say that this is really flimsy. There's nothing to this lawsuit, and I mean they're alleging a breach of contract for not following its governing documents. They cite that the presidents of Minnesota and Michigan State were wondering whether a vote actually took place. But look, I don't know. I don't know what more they need in terms of information. They see all these other industries shutting down because of the coronavirus. They see now that students are getting back on these campuses that these clusters are breaking out because they're having parties and things like that. And I would assume that football practice would constitute a place where you could have a cluster when you're breathing heavily around players for hours at a time. And they're like, gosh, I don't get it. Just because you got folks in the ACC, Big 12, and SEC that are perhaps not following the medical advice, perhaps are being less, not perhaps, are definitely being less careful. Doesn't mean that the Big Ten should do that. Should do the same thing. And so, the Big Ten doesn't need to give any more information. It's not just college football. It's not just college sports. There are industries throughout the country that are suffering because of the coronavirus. I want to point out a couple of things from a story on this issue from ESPN.com, because it was a story that featured quotes from some of the Nebraska parents. And one of them was the mother of I think it was a cornerback or something like that. A safety. It was the mother of a safety, Noah Pola Gates. I don't have any clue who that person is. But let's see if I can find the quote real quick. But basically, this mother was saying that they weren't even trying to start the season back up. Well, here we go. She says, the purpose of the lawsuit, she said, isn't a reversal of the Big Ten's decision. It's a legal push for more clarity as to why it was postponed. We still need answers, she said. And then the story also interviewed Kim Newsom, the mother of a cornerback, and she said that there are a lot of Husker parents and a lot of other Big Ten parents who agree with the league. So there shouldn't be a narrative out there that everybody in Nebraska has the same view. You did mention that there were only 8 players, and they have probably over 100 players if you include walk-ons on their roster. So I would assume that there's maybe a significant minority, but a minority of players who are upset about this, certainly a minority who are protesting and trying to sue because of this. And a lot of the parents on the Nebraska roster and elsewhere in the Big Ten, I would assume even with the Deep South Buckeyes, are saying, yeah, we get it. We get it. So, eventually they'll quit, whether it's because of time or because there'll be outbreaks at other conferences, or maybe they'll shut down, but they'll get it. And until then, they can just whine and say, we don't understand why we can't play during this coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, well, when it comes to health, and we know Nebraska was one of those teams, even though we didn't see the vote, we know that they're a red state. We know that they wanted to play football. And when you talk to people in the South, their approach when it comes down to the coronavirus is like, let's get it. Let it run its course. We're not worried about it. Let's face it. We got to get it anyways. We've got no issue with it. It's not dangerous for people. And that's what a lot of their approach is. Now, when you look at this Big Ten attorney today, I thought, this is just a couple parents like you're talking about. But this Big Ten attorney, when he talked about not showing any documents, his quote was, he argues that harm would be incredible if these documents were made public. Well, when you
That's intriguing.
When you say something like that, it makes it like, wow, we got to see what it is now. Even if you're if you're accepting that the Big Ten is going to play football, if you understand, hey, it's for the safety of the players, even though you love football. And those are the categories that I'm in. I do when I see a quote from, the Big Ten saying that the harm would be incredible. What harm? I mean, the harm to what? A lawsuit that would be coming at you, or potentially that you guys don't have a leg to stand on? So it makes it seem like the Big Ten is hiding something. So my guess is that we're going to see some more schools, and at least, I'm saying not at least, the exact thing we just want to see now, just out of curiosity, is okay, the Big Ten, you mishandled this situation all the way through. Now, let's really see these documents of what you guys were saying behind the scenes, and let's see it made public. You guys are public institutions. They should make it public.
I don't understand what could possibly be in these documents that could be so surprising or damaging. Just think about what we already know. We know that the coronavirus can kill. We know that it can make people sick. We know that an Indiana football player, a true freshman, had to be hospitalized because of breathing problems. We know that a true freshman at Georgia State, a quarterback, has had lots of health issues, and I believe he had a heart issue related to getting the coronavirus. We know that, I mean, all this stuff is common knowledge. Like, what, even if in the documents they said there was no formal vote and Kevin Warren just said, I'm the dictator, we're not going to have sports, would that be, I mean, I guess it'd be kind of surprising that there wasn't a vote, but considering so many have backed him up in the conference, considering we know how dangerous it is, what in these documents could be so bad that they would put out a comment like that? I don't think that anything could be. Is that like Russian missile secrets or something in there?
Well, you never know. Like, you would think that these presidents and the Big Ten commissioner would know that they're public institutions, and if they're sending emails on their ud.com, accounts,
so
that they would keep everything above board, and that you would. But sometimes, and I'll take you back to Kwame Kilpatrick. I mean, he had city issued phones, and he knew that those could be public record, and he was over there. Texted, about,
So was the Illinois chancellor like cheating on his wife with some cohorts from a foreign country?
I don't know, but when you're saying the harm could be incredible, I'll just say, what if it's the Michigan State? Like, yeah, those hillbillies down in the SEC. I don't know what they're saying. Oh, these goofballs down south. That. You know what? I could imagine them taking just a few. Again, you don't know. People think that their email, that they're just sending it when you're at 2:00 in the morning, you had a couple glasses of wine, you think you're just, sending something to the chancellor at Purdue, and next thing you know, everybody can see it. I'm tired of these Republicans. It could be anything like that, but it's got to be something. It's got to be something. It's not just all a bunch of benign, doctor talk. I'm guessing that there's some,
you
some
think
political,
there's some trash talk in there or something like that?
I think there's something like, somebody was getting a little loose on the keyboard, saying some things. What else? I mean,
the FOIA would probably be able to get that information out eventually. But I mean, do they? If you're trying to, I guess if you're trying to find answers, you might want to get the emails from every single chancellor and president out there, but by then, it probably would be June or something like that. I just don't know that they're going to find anything. I think that one thing that is interesting about this is that, not specifically about this, but one of the other stories in the Big Ten to come out in the last couple of days is that the Columbus Dispatch learned that the Big Ten is considering playing their winter/spring football season in domes in St. Louis, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit, and for some reason possibly Syracuse, New York. I think if they're going to be playing in January or February, this makes sense because you don't want unpaid athletes playing outdoors in Madison, Minneapolis, or East Lansing when it's 14 degrees outside and there's 30-mile-per-hour winds. The Big Ten has the money, so they might as well try to do something like that. The whole Syracuse, New York thing doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can have a triple header in 3 or 4 different locations every Saturday and be good.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Syracuse is out there. That's where Rutgers and Penn State is. So maybe just the proximity of thinking of trying to give them some pseudo home games. I don't know.
No.
I mean, I think that would be the thought there. Yeah, I think that's exactly why they came up with the Carrier Dome there. But the one thing, you can't play outside here in September, but you can play indoors in January. There's a lot of things that's why do you think it's going to be different then? So why should we get so excited about?
Well, it could be.
Right, it could be. The Big Ten stance is the reason they're shutting everything down is because the virus is unknown. So the hope is, cross your fingers, by then. But I mean, that's the part. Even this week, we're going to get to the saliva tests and how many you can get. And, that people keep calling it a game changer. Well, actually, if you think about September 26th and you look at the date today, you really, football practice could be starting Friday. Is it okay to start practice if you have all these different tests and you have the capability of, testing guys day and night, maybe sending them to a couple different labs, even to guard against positive or false positives? I mean, all of those things are some possibilities. And in the weird way that even though the Big Ten president said there wasn't going to be any football if there wasn't any in-person instruction, he could have said, look, well, you know what? Who knew that it would be better for the football team if there was just online classes, it would make it more likely that you might be able to get some of these games off. Well, there's a lot of feedback coming in. Keith, who's one of our favorites, demanding or actually asking if we're going to read any of his comments. Keith, you must have stepped away for a second. A lot of them taking shots about, Trump. I did talk.
Yeah, this is not Fox News. This is not MSNBC, so we're not just going to read political talking points.
Yeah, I did read one of your ones about preaching divisiveness, and I didn't talk about police brutality, and the one about decency about Trump, I did leave that one out. You telling me to watch MSNBC to get the truth. I don't know. I watch all of them here or there. It's not really my cup of tea. Any of the cable news networks, actually local news, I'll just read and find out everything that I need to know online. I don't really need to watch the TV, but I appreciate the suggestion. And then those are all of your live chats. I appreciate you putting them on there. I read most of them. You got to admit that.
All right, let's turn the page now to the third chapter. And with the third chapter, that takes us to a team that's not playing tonight, the Detroit Tigers. They voted as a team to not play in the wake of the shooting of Jacob Blake. And obviously, the Twins did as well. And I thought it was interesting that word came out about the Twins deciding not to play first. So I think the Tigers might have decided not to play in reaction to the Twins saying, well, we're not playing. But before that vote was taken, or those votes were taken, Tigers GM Al Avila spoke to the dishonest media, and he made some headlines about some of the top prospects. Obviously, 3 have already been brought up, Paredes, Skubal, and Mize. But Matt Manning is I believe he's the number 4 or 5 prospect in the Tigers system. He's a starting pitcher. Alex Faedo, I think he's just outside the top 10. He was a first-round pick a few years ago. He announced that those 2 would be shut down for the remainder of the season for identical injuries, forearm strains on their pitching forearms. Also, I know that you predicted that Spencer Torkelson would make his major league debut this year and he would hit at least 1 home run. That's not happening because Avila said that the first overall pick would not be called up to the big leagues this year. According to a tweet from Jason Beck of MLB.com, Avila said it might be different if there was a full season with minor league baseball, but that's not happening. And as for Monday's 4 p.m. trade deadline, Avila said, quote, I wouldn't say we're sellers and I wouldn't say we're buyers. I'd say we're looking for an opportunity to make our team better this year, next year, and the year after that, end quote. Now, if you're wondering, well, what the heck should they do? The Tigers are terrible. They recently lost 9 in a row. But at 13-16, having won 4 of their last 6, they're only 2 games back of the Blue Jays for the final wild card spot in the AL. So what do you think, Dennis, about those Avila comments on the prospects and also on Monday's trade deadline?
Well, the next time Avila says something that excites me as a Tiger fan will be the first time. Everything is boring. No, you guys aren't going to be able to see anybody. Those forearm strains, you might as well talk about. Those guys are going to end up having Tommy John. That's usually what code is for forearm strains, so that's no good. And we might. The biggest thing is about I've been down this road too many times now with Al Avila. Al Avila at a poker table, he might as well. It seems like he flips up his cards. He is terrible at being able to get value and being able to get the most out of the players that he has. You go all the way back when he came in, and he put the yard sale up, okay, everybody's for sale, and no. Then he was a week later, hey, nobody's calling. That's what his.
Yeah, and he's
his
saying
report
all
was.
these products on my yard are defective. You don't want them.
Yeah, all the way through. He waited till the 12th hour, begging everybody to get 11th hour to begging everybody to take Verlander. Last year, he had Matt Boyd out there. And the thing is, I get it. I wanted him to keep Matt Boyd too and Fulmer, but it looks like he's been wrong, actually. On his decisions there. And if I was the GM, and
I don't think anybody wanted Boyd.
I would have taken the heat. Maybe they would have been able to. But the thing is that. He didn't make a deal there. Remember, it was he was holding out for Gleyber Torres. Now, I don't think that was I think that was assigned to him. I don't think he actually said that, but that was pretty crazy.
Or
But
why not trade Nico Goodrum for Mike Trout? I mean, stuff like that's not going to happen.
Some of that, he's not, to say it nicely, he's just not been very inspiring in any of the moves there and any of the other things that he has to say. He's basically gotten a free pass because we know the team is rebuilding and it's a 5-year plan, it's a 6-year plan, and man, he's just sitting out there and what a hard ask, man. Chris Ilitch out there. Hey, 6-7 years down the line, you know what? We'll spend a little money. Oh, come on. It'll be fun. Maybe not next year, but in 2023, we expect to compete for the division. It's like 2023. I know baseball is one of those games you have to have a lot of patience in, but you tell me 2023, that's the time that we should expect, full ballpark and excitement like we saw back, in 2006 or, the early 2010s when they won the Central 4 years in a row. 2023, see you then.
I would expect the Tigers to not be competing by 2023 if Avila is still the general manager, because he's a poor general manager. Think about what he could do between now and 2023. He could make more bad trades for atrocious prospects. He could sign the next Jordan Zimmerman. I mean, I'm not looking forward to Avila's moves. Perhaps these prospects that he's brought up can start to perform, because Paredes has just been, Skubal has been bad, and Casey Mize has, through 2 starts, shown that he's got an extraordinary split finger, but in terms of going deep into games and getting great production, it's only been 2 starts, but he has not looked like the next Clayton Kershaw as of yet. So, I don't expect that if Avila is here in 2023, the Tigers are going to be competing for anything outside of, competing for 70 wins, hopefully. But as far as what Avila said, the Manning comments and Faedo comments were only surprising because nobody knew anything about their forearm injuries. I don't think that means Tommy John, because that's more elbow, but it's not that surprising. The Torkelson news was, that's like saying the sky is blue. He was just not going to come up, and hopefully we'll see him in 2022. As far as being buyers or sellers, I've got mixed feelings on this, and here's why. Obviously, I don't think the Tigers are going to make the World Series and make the playoffs this year. They're 4-11 since they started playing real teams after that 9-5 start. They're frauds. And I think that when you look at who the Tigers could trade away now that C.J. Cron is out for the year, there's really only one hitter that they could consider, and that's Jonathan Scope, who leads the team in just about every offensive category. And then in terms of pitchers, maybe you could get someone to bite on Cisnero, Norris, or Turnbull. Do I think that Avila would get a good return for any of those guys, particularly Scope, who's only going to be on a roster for 1 regular season month plus the playoffs? No, he's a terrible general manager. But, if perhaps somebody is desperate and they want to give up a top 100 prospect, who knows? The reason I feel mixed about this is because there's one guy that I would consider trading for in terms of being a buyer, and that's Mike Clevenger of the Cleveland Indians. He's been great the last 3 years. The Indians are desperate to get rid of him because the whole clubhouse is pissed off at him and Zach Plesac after the 2 of them went out in Chicago and risked getting coronavirus. They brought him back up yesterday for a start. He had a good start, and the word is that he could be on the trade block. Trevor Thompson talked about that yesterday on FSD. If you could trade for Clevenger, who's got 2 years left of team control after this year, maybe sign him long-term eventually, and not have to give up Mize, Torkelson, or Green, I would consider trading for him.
Yeah, I don't think that the Indians, it's a good point about them maybe being a little ticked off about them running out for that dinner.
They're furious.
They were, so there might be a chance there. But when you look at the roster, the pitching staff that they have, Clevenger fits in there pretty nice, and that looks like a nice rotation. I think they would be more willing to give up Plesac than Clevenger. But yeah, I'm with you. I like him. I just don't think that they're going to be getting rid of him as upset as they might be with him.
Well, look, when you got a guy who's one of your best pitchers and then you demote him for weeks at a time, and then you only bring him up a week before the trade deadline when he's 100% healthy. That, and then of course Trevor Thompson saying, and Fox Sports Detroit doesn't exactly go around breaking news, especially when it comes to other teams. That's just not what they do. But when Trevor Thompson's going out there, and there are other media outlets saying that the Indians are putting him on the trade block, I saw ESPN mentioning that as well. That says that they want to get rid of this guy. I remember hearing last week that there was one Indians player who said if Plesac or Clevenger are brought back to the Major League roster this year, that they would sit out the rest of the year. I can't imagine that they would bring Clevenger back, knowing that one player, who I forget his name, made that comment, unless they were just trying to ship him out and get something for him.
They need outfielders, so I don't think they're going to take Scope, but so you're going to have to give them an outfielder.
Not Green.
No, they're going to need somebody that can play right now. Like, I don't know, Maven's hit the ball here just in a couple games. Let's make that deal. And I'm sure Al's like, hey, you want Cameron Maven? Well, give us Clevenger.
Yeah, that's right. You hate that guy. Why not?
And then, Al's like, why am I getting a dial tone here? Let's look at some of the feedback here. DJ, Yankees must not be playing tonight.
Oh.
He says the Tigers got nothing to sell. And they're not good enough to buy. That's kind of straight to the point there.
Well,
the only deadline deal Avila has ever pulled off for trades he loses.
Well, they don't have to be a buyer, or they don't have to be a good team to have the assets to go after someone like Clevenger if the price is right. If the Indians are just saying, we want to get rid of him no matter what, look, I would assume that contenders would want to pay more for a guy like Clevenger than the Tigers would, because if you're a contender, then perhaps you don't have a space on your roster for your top 3 prospects that are almost major league ready, and they can just say, yeah, just take these guys, give us Clevenger, we want to win right now. But I mean, if the Tigers want to fast forward their rebuilding process, if they're looking and saying we're only 3 games below 500 despite our lack of talent, and we don't have any pitchers we can trust right now, and boom, all of a sudden you've got yourself an ace, it's something to consider.
Norris and Soto for Clevenger?
Yeah, I think I would give up a couple of relievers for Clevenger. Yeah.
So would I. Although
give him Garcia too.
No, well, I like Soto, and I like as a long reliever Norris, but I would make that for a starter. That would be the ace here for Detroit, and you have control beyond this year. I'm there with you.
Yeah.
Keith on YouTube says, at least the Tigers won 2 out of 3 from the Indians. We should be celebrating that. But he does say Avila is not a good GM. He hasn't done much of anything. I give no credit for Torkelson and Mize. Those were gimmies.
They were. 100%. 100%. All right, Dennis, you ready to turn the page to the 4th chapter?
I am ready to do that. And for that, we get to some big news in COVID testing. Earlier, a couple days ago, we saw that there was a saliva test that was out there online that was being talked about as cheaper and available. And then Donald Trump, there was a story today that he's putting out $750 million to buy
of his own money.
Sure, well, isn't it all his? To buy $150 million of what he was calling, or the story was calling, rapid tests, $5 a test. Now they mentioned that they're going to go to schools and to nursing homes, but you immediately think of, wow, $5 a test, rapid tests. A chance that they could get this to college football. And if it doesn't mean, I don't think the Big Ten's going to reverse it, but this could mean good things for the 3 Power 5 that are still involved. And it could mean good things for the Big Ten and the Pac-12 if they're really going to try to ramp things up in December practices with a chance to play some winter football in January.
Yeah, well, first off, when I saw this story about the $5 tests and you get the results in 15 minutes, 97% accuracy, my first thought was not, all right, great, they're going to give this to all the athletes and then we can have our sports. I mean, as a sports fan, it's kind of fun to think about, and we do think about, well, how can we save football, and could they start the Big Ten on October 1st if the first 10 million batches go to the Big Ten schools and all that stuff? But no, if they're buying 150 million tests at $5 a pop. Football players are not the most important. Baseball players, basketball players, bubble or not, they're not the most important. And they have to go to schools first, particularly K through 12, because you want to ensure that parents can go to work as opposed to babysitting their kids all day. You want to make sure that little Miss Mabel, the 70-year-old English teacher, is not going to get sick from her students. And obviously, if you're younger and you're less likely to get to have symptoms from the coronavirus, you don't want the kids going back home to see their 45 and 50-year-old parents and giving them a big hug and coronavirus. So it would need to go to K through 12, obviously hospitals and nursing homes, and then after that, you could look at colleges as well. But the number one thing would, I would assume, not be to give it to student athletes so they can start playing football, baseball, basketball, tennis and everything else. It would be to ensure that students could get into classrooms and start learning the way that they have been learning. So I think that would be the number one thing. Could this be a game changer? Absolutely. I mean, it's one thing if you got the standard tests that are giving you results in 3 to 5 days. Meanwhile, you're sneezing coronavirus on everybody. It's another thing if you've got a rapid test that gives you results in 2 to 4 hours. But if it's 15 minutes, I mean, you think about a K through 12 kid, you could get them a test once every Monday, and if school starts at 7:30, say, all right, everybody shows up at school a half hour early at 7 a.m. and get your test, and if you test negative, you can go in. If you test positive, then you go home for a week. I mean, that could dramatically change things. I mean, if you want to go into a stadium, well, get there a half hour early, take your 15-minute test, and if you pass, you can pack the stadium, and if not, go on home and quarantine for a little bit. This could be a huge game changer, as cheap as it is, as effective as it's supposed to be, if all this is accurate.
Yeah, forget kindergarten through 12, man. I want to see if we can get a reversal for the Big Ten and get them out there. Let's sue for it. Yeah, you're right. We can't just let's just get them all to the sports so we can have so make sure we have March Madness.
Yeah.
Forget about high school.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't want it to turn political where, the government is saying, all right, we got to make sure that we want to get votes in November in Big Ten country, so we're going to ensure that Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, who flipped the election last time, they're going to get the first votes, and they're going to play the first football games, Michigan State versus Wisconsin and Michigan versus Penn State, to get everything going. They have to go to the right places. So as long as they're going to the right places and they work like they're supposed to, it could be huge. It's just a matter of how quickly they can get the tests out. And they're saying that they could have, I think it's 100 million tests created by October 1st or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. As much as I want to see Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers and everything, you got to make sure you're getting the high schools all sorted out before you're thinking about making sure college basketball is up and running the day after Thanksgiving. All right, we do have some more feedback before we make some bets and all of that. And let's go. Here's Raj jumping in. I haven't seen Raj in a while. He wants to know if we're taking the over or under 8 wins for the Lions. And Keith says, I'm taking the under. But Dennis says, hey, Lions slappy, and I'll take the over. Yep. Let's take his money. Well, you know what? If I take it, I'm not going to put any money. Like, you're not going to see me posting any betting slips, going downtown and putting the over. And is it 8? I am picking the Lions to win 9 games this year. I don't pick them to win 9 games. The last 2 years, I think I picked them to win 5 and 6 games. And I thought I did a pretty good job making my selections there. And in those years, people were telling me, I was a hater. Mm-hmm. In 2015, I picked them to win the NFC North and beat the Packers. And 2 games in, that went sideways. So I look at it each and every year and make my pick. And I know that when I pick them to be, sometimes you pick them to win 7 games, people call you a homer.
Just trust me, because 2 years ago I said 6-10. I was 100% right. Last year I said 4-11-1. Yes, I predicted a tie, and they were 3-12-1. So when it comes to Lions predictions, trust me. As for the major wager, I don't don't know. And
20 years ago, Drew Sharp said, just always pick against Michigan and the Lions, and you'll do really well. And if I would have taken his advice 20 years ago, I'd be sitting here saying, hey, you know what? Always just get right out there. Drew didn't show very much transparency. He was like, the Lions suck. And, I'm always picking against Michigan.
Even though he went to Michigan.
I know. I just take it year by year. I still do that. Meanwhile, I wish that since we started getting to Major Wager, and we're going to get to story time here, and if you have any more feedback, you can throw it up there. We'll read it here on the fifth chapter. I wish I actually would have been putting money down on some of these things I'm betting. I remember the first bets, I took the Orioles and the Tigers over their numbers, I think 20 and 21. Well, the O's have like 16 wins already, and Tigers aren't looking very bad either. So both of those look good. The Dodgers look like they are going to – I got the Dodgers and Yankees going under. The Dodgers looking pretty good. So the Yankees are the ones that I need to I just need to get 3 out of 4, and I'll do well on that. But I took the Canucks plus 200 the other night, which is pretty good. There's no basketball or hockey line, so I have to look to baseball. I'm going to bet the Tigers on both sides of the doubleheader tomorrow against the Twins. Whoa!
You're parlaying it?
No, I'm taking a 25, whatever the money line is for both. I think the Tigers will probably be pretty plus 150, plus 175 going against the Twins. Should I go against them or should I go with them? I'm going to go with them.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Well, and if you put it on
25 each.
Yeah, if you do 25 each and they split, then you win because they're going to be underdogs in both games.
All right, good point. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, as for me, I picked a game, and obviously you can follow me on Twitter at BeachHouse I picked another game that I figured was a no-brainer. The Pirates and Cardinals had a doubleheader. I went with the Cardinals minus 1.5 at plus 140 in a Manfred ball game in the second game of the doubleheader. The Cardinals are a decent team. The Pirates are the worst team in the league. I was a little bit concerned because the Pirates won the first game, but I knew that they would obviously get blown out in the second game. And the Pirates won the second game too, 2-0. So I've just been getting some really bad luck with my major wagers. I mean, I'm picking what I think should be no-brainers, and then these huge upsets are taking place. I don't get it.
Well, I followed some of your line of thinking, like when you were looking at Miami and you were looking at the pitchers that they brought up. Those all seemed to be reasonable bets that you were making. And then when they did go into a slide, I thought, well, that was it. But, the Marlins just keep going out there. If you would have just kept hammering the Marlins, thinking that at some point they're going to fall off the cliff, you'd be broke right now. So, yeah. I mean, it seemed like a pretty good line of thinking, but, just get off the Marlins. That's all I can say.
Yeah. All right, Dennis, now let's turn the page to the fifth chapter, and that means it's story time. That's an opportunity for us to share a story from our lives. I, of course, have another ride-sharing story, but first we start off with the man, the fifth, the legend, Dennis Fithian.
Yeah, I feel like I've had a boring week or two here, so nothing, that great to tell everybody about. You know what? About 3 weeks ago, you sometimes you stub your toe, you like kick a chair or something, and then you're like hobbling around. I kicked the chair. I didn't think I kicked it that hard, but man, I kicked it the next day. My foot was all bruised up. So for 2 weeks, man, I had to just sit around. No walking, no shooting hoops, no golfing. I don't golf. I just chip 70 yards, but I couldn't do any of that. Those are the 3 things that I've done. So, man, I was just sitting around. So the only thing that I could say is 2 years ago, I decided I was going to have a garden, but I was going to slow play it and compost for a year or two, really get some good soil. And man, the soil. And so this was 2 years ago. This year, it all came, and I got this great soil, and I planted a couple tomato plants. But who knew, when you have all this compost, that the seeds that you throw in there, they just random things pop up, and cucumbers and squash and all these tomatoes. And it was all good, and I just started getting some tomatoes, which is pretty fun, if you've never done any gardening or anything before. But here's the bad news. I have the goats, which you may have saw on Twitter that I put in our preview. The goats, I've been able to train them to do some certain things with my German Shepherd and to stay out of the garage and things like that. They actually listen. But, man, those goats love the tomatoes, and they go after them like it's a catnip or something for cats or whatever their dog treats. They just love tomato plants. They love the tomatoes and they love the plants, and it's surrounded by a fence so the deer won't get into them. But man, they jump up and they lean in and they still get the tomatoes. So I had all of these tomatoes, all of these great tomato plants and all this, but the goats love tomatoes. I guess
Build the wall.
I need a better fencing, better wall. The only positive is they don't seem to like the squash leaves and cucumber leaves. They're not very fond of those, but tomatoes, they're all about. That's it. That's my story.
All right. Well, that was a good gardening story. As for my ride sharing story, I picked up a guy at maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. I think it was Friday night or something like that. And he got into my car. He was kind of tired, kind of laid back, and he said that he was on his way to his girlfriend's 21st birthday party. So that's obviously good news. And I asked if it was going to be a big party with no social distancing, and I figured his answer was going to be yes, or he'd lie to me or something like that. But he said he was just going to his girlfriend's parents' house. And he said they'd been dating for 4 years and that they were in what he labeled a ghetto marriage because they had been living together for a couple of years, but they weren't actually married. And I said, well, when are you going to drop to a knee and make it a real marriage? And he said he wasn't sure, and he was concerned about commitment, and he takes marriage very seriously. And I said that that's a good thing, and you probably should take it seriously. And he said he's only 25 years old, so he's still got time. And then I started doing the math, and I was like, well, wait a second. You guys have been together for 4 years, and she's turning 21. That means you started dating her when she was in high school and you were 21 years old? And he was like, yeah. And he kind of laughed about it. And I said, well, didn't you think it was kind of weird as a 21-year-old to be dating a high school junior? And he said that there were so many things that were wrong with his life at the time that he just decided to go in the exact opposite direction of what he should have done. And he went out with her anyway. And he said that it wasn't he that pursued her, which is a good thing. He wasn't like sitting in the high school parking lot trying to get, girls' numbers. He said that a coworker of his at the time said that she was interested in him, and that's how they started their relationship. Now, I definitely wouldn't have done that, but I guess that was his cover. But then I asked him if her parents were concerned that their daughter at one time was dating a man who was 4 years older than their high school junior daughter. And he said no, they were always very welcoming of him. So that was obviously kind of weird. But he said that they treated him like family, and they replaced his biological family. And I asked what happened, and he said that his dad died when he was 17 years old, and his mom was never really in his life, and she was already dead. And so I said, well, who raised you? And he said that he just kind of bounced around from different relatives, his grandparents, aunts, and uncles, and that it was a real challenge for him growing up. And he said that he grew up around people that made a lot of bad decisions. His dad was an addict. I think his dad was a heroin addict, but his dad was an addict. And he said that he saw hopelessness in his dad's eyes in the weeks and months leading up to his father's death, and his dad died of an overdose. And he said that he did not want to be like his dad after seeing that look in his eyes. And I said that was a good decision, because a lot of people wouldn't have taken that route. They would have eventually become just like their dad and said, this is all I know. And he said that at the time he was doing some bad things, but he was able to stop. He didn't go into detail about what he was doing, but I guess you can just kind of make your own guesses. But he said that he's been pretty much on his own since he was 17 years old. He's been going to AA, and that's really helped him. So he admitted that he was at one time an alcoholic. And he said that one of the other things that was important to him was becoming a good father. He said he didn't have any kids, but he wasn't raised by the best father and wasn't sure how to be one. So I just told him, hey, that's understandable. But wanting to be a good father is half the battle, especially nowadays, because there's so many men out there that don't even want to be fathers. They just want to be sperm donors and walk away. So I said you should be proud of yourself for at least wanting and having that goal of being a good father, even though you don't really have a good example of one and didn't have one growing up. So he thanked me for that, and then he asked me if I was a man of faith, and I said that I was, and I asked the same question of him, and he said he was getting there. He said he didn't really grow up going to church, but a lot of the AA groups that he goes to are backed by churches, and he's been getting into it and reading his Bible, and that's helped him. And it just sucked for him not having the ability to meet, because obviously most church doors are closed right now due to the coronavirus pandemic. And I said, yeah, it's not the same watching it on YouTube or Facebook Live. Well, obviously you're enjoying the fifth chapter on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. But a couple minutes later, we got to his girlfriend's place, and he thanked me for the conversation, and I wished him well. But it was interesting to see that he came from obviously a bad environment. He didn't have everything stacked in his direction. He grew up behind the 8 ball, and then he went into this atypical relationship that a lot of folks would frown upon. And that's been one of the best things for him, because it's given him kind of a family structure that he hasn't had before. And despite the fact that he grew up in a broken and bad family, he's so determined to be a good family man, both as a future husband and a future father.
Hey, you know what? You get it done, man, on those drives. I don't think I wouldn't be so chit-chatty, but then I like it.
Yeah,
well, you know what?
It's weird because people open up to strangers very quickly, or at least they have to me. And I've actually been told by a lot of people that I'm very easy to talk to when I'm driving them around, which, I mean, it seems strange. But I learned very quickly as a driver that I can ask people uncomfortable questions and delve deeper and deeper, and they'll just give me the answer. Whereas if I were to ask that same question to somebody that I know, they're like, yeah, I don't want to tell you this. You're going to tell everybody I know. But it's been weird, but good, the way that a lot of my riders, most of my riders, respond to me when we talk during our rides.
Well, when the virus blows over, maybe in 2021, we'll have a fifth chapter live somewhere out on some patio, and you'll still be able to watch it on Facebook Live, but maybe you'll be able to rally out and come out and meet up, Keith and Matt and Carl, and there you go.
And everybody else, even those that don't comment.
That's right. Not everybody has to comment. But coming up Tuesday, will we have sports back? Will the Tigers still be playing good ball? Will they have anybody new on their team? We'll get to all of that. Ryan Chapman, Dennis Fith, and thanks for watching the fifth chapter.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the fifth chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast, or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the fifth chapter.